Hello everyone, so today I want to talk about ancestry. So if you're not interested, click out of this video. But a lot of people are interested, and I learned something that was shocking, revealing, and this is, so for everyone that doesn't know, I'm like Indian, and on my father's side, I'm full Indian. My dad's family is full Indian, aboriginal. So I've met, I not met, I started communicating with my cousins for a couple of months now. I started talking more to my mother about my father, does she remember anything? And I was telling my cousins, like, hey, your dad looks like my dad. Your dad and my father look exactly alike, and I don't understand why my dad doesn't remember your dad. I don't understand why my dad doesn't remember your aunt. I don't understand why my dad doesn't remember any of you. Why doesn't he remember any of his brothers? I don't understand. And they're like, oh well, he has his reasons for not talking and blah blah blah. And that was like, yeah, I guess. But still, that answer was not gonna satisfy me. You know what I mean? Mm, it's like no, there has to be a reason. You know what I mean? Like, I'm 11. I remember when I was 11. I remember when I was 5. I remember all that. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how old you grow. It's not like he has Alzheimer's or like bad memory. It's like he doesn't. It might be trauma, maybe, that he doesn't remember. That's what I was thinking, but that's not the truth. So yeah, I started talking to everyone, and I learned the reason why my father doesn't remember or talked about his past. The reason is, for anyone that doesn't know, I mean, so the reason is that my father was embarrassed to be like aboriginal, like like Indian. He was embarrassed. He was ashamed. He disliked, that he didn't want to be part of it. And that's you. He couldn't change. You can't change your skin color. You can't change your hair. He never cared about that. I believe. I'm not sure. Maybe he did, but from what I know, maybe he didn't. But he did try to. He did change his traditions. Like, he doesn't speak his native language. He doesn't know anything about, like, he just didn't want to be associated with any of that. And I was talking to my aunt, and I told her, well, my dad said he doesn't remember. But then I told him, I think he's ashamed. I think he's embarrassed because he didn't have a home. Because he didn't have a home, and because he lived in a mud house. I think I told him how he was embarrassed of the way his parents lived. The lifestyle they were born in. He was embarrassed of all that. And I remember before I talked to my mom told me, to my mom, can you tell me more about when my uncle came to visit my dad and take him to his mother, and then she was telling me, yeah, well, one of your dad's friends brought his brother to work, and your dad told him, why did you bring him here? And then he told him, leave. And then my uncle was telling my dad, oh, my mom wants to see you. My mom wants to see you, blah, blah, blah. Your dad is dying, blah, blah, blah. Or your dad's dead already, I don't know. And then my dad was saying no, and my mom told me he was embarrassed of his brother. He was ashamed, because they're Indian. So even though my dad's Indian, that if anyone knows what I mean, like, yeah, you're Indian, but you're embarrassed of your brother because they're Indian. And my dad looks Indian, so he was embarrassed of the physical. I don't know. I don't want to say physical, but like the Indian stuff. You know what I mean? He was embarrassed of all that. The language. My dad doesn't speak it. My uncle speaks it, but to this day he still speaks it. So I was like, oh, okay, And then I talked to my aunt. And I was telling her about my father, and she was like, yeah, he was embarrassed to be Indian. You know, he never came to visit his mom when his mom was asking for him. Never once said, never. You know, my father left his parents when he was like 11 years old. Never saw them. Never called them. Never told me anything about them. So, you know, he didn't want to do anything with them with that type of lifestyle. And does he regret it? Maybe, I don't know. We all make mistakes, and I'm not saying it's a mistake what he did, but you know, life isn't fair. You know, when you do stuff, we lie all the time. You know, it happens. That's life, or that's how it is. So I, I was starting to learn a lot of stuff that I didn't know. So I wish I could have met my grandma and my grandpa, but I didn't. You know, my grandma died like maybe 7 years ago. You know, I could have met her. I was trying to find her that, before she died. You know, that same year she died, I was going to look for her. You know, I was trying my best. I was asking everyone to give me the information to go find them. And she died that year. I went to ask people, started to ask. You know, it's kind of strange. So I never met my grandma, but at least I have my cousins, my uncles, and I started talking to my cousins, and I don't know, I'm happy that I'm talking to them. You know what I mean? It's like, because I didn't grow up with them. You know, I didn't grow up like an aboriginal person. You know, I grew up in the city, so I learned a lot from them, and and I like them, and they like me, and they're so nice to me, and we took a DNA test kit, DNA test. You know, my cousin's dad is my uncle, so I'm pretty, I'm 100% sure they're my family. I think it's interesting because, I didn't grow up with like brown people, so it's like, oh, it's like, I was gonna say finally. What I'm trying to say is like, oh, like, now I'm like with people that look like me. You know what I mean? Like dark hair, brown eyes. Dark skin. So I feel like I have something in common. It's like, oh, I was like, I see a lot of my cousins. They're brown, and it's like, oh, there's many people like me. You know what I mean? Like that are brown. Like because like since my dad's Aboriginal, I'm Aboriginal too. You know what I mean? How you don't really grow, especially in the city. There's not a lot of. You do see a lot of mixed people. You see a lot of other people, but you don't really I mean, you also get to see Aboriginal people, but not that often. You know what I mean? And since I'm Aboriginal, it's like how many Aboriginal people are where I am? How many people do I talk to that are Aboriginal? Not a lot. You know what I mean? Most people I talk to are like mixed. Black and white. Black and whatever, etc., etc. So it's like, finally I get, I was happy that I have people that are, that we're related. We have something in common. There's many things. We have like traditions. You know what I mean? Like I started to learn traditions. You know what I mean? I started, these traditions I didn't know that were passed down. I kind of learned some of them. I'm starting to learn a couple of traditions. Some of the words in my native language. I'm starting to learn a couple of things. It's like tradition. That's what's I don't want to say it's important because, you know, no, I don't know. I don't know about tradition, you know what I mean? It's always good to progress. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I'm happy to learn about my past. You know, that there's people like me that they're showing me what some of their ancestors did. You know, back then. You know, the aboriginal lifestyle. You know, and it's a, I guess I don't know. Like I don't want to say it's aboriginal, but at the same time, when you know, when the what's it called? I don't want to say the invaders. You know, when the invaders came to America, you know, the Indians were placed. They were placed into certain locations, and you know they weren't given land. You know, when they were distributing the land, they weren't distributing. They didn't distribute fairly. You know, the Indians got less land than the other mixed Indians. You know, so it was unfair. And before that, you know, the Indians had alive, you know, and I don't like they had a communicating system. Now the way I see, like, how do I say, the I'm trying to say is that it's hard to like make it's hard to tell from everything because you know you have the lifestyle where you were placed in a location, you know, like they were placed in a location there, you know, but what happened before that? Like, did they used to move a lot? You know, have they always lived there? You know, have they lived there for 10,000 years? You know, like, you know, how did they get there and stuff? You know, it's like, so, and I noticed that they have like some traditions where it's like weird. It's weird traditions, but then they also have like the regular traditions, like what you get after you have like the pre-Columbian traditions, and you have the Colombian. I don't know what to call, like the when the invaders came or whatever, the Europeans came. There we go, the Europeans. When the Europeans came, you have that. So you know, for example, like when the Europeans came, like one example is religion. Like, um, as you know, when the Europeans came, they forced their religions on the Indians. You know, that's why like when you look at a lot of like the Indians, you'll see that a lot of them, like Indians, are either they're Catholic or they're not religious, but they have like Catholic traditions because they were forced to be Catholic. So they're not Catholic, but they're just there because it's like a tradition that was implemented on them. You know, they're forced to learn the religion of the Catholic people because they forced all the Indians, or majority of the Indians, even though they ran off. Or no, I don't think they ran off. No, never mind. I'm making that up. But yeah, they you have that tradition versus, and then you have a mixed tradition. You know what I mean? You have a mixed tradition. They have mixed traditions. Like when they do certain stuff, it's like religious. But then it's their tradition. Like they're doing something, but in a way, like religion was added to it. You know, so it's like a mixed combination of like tradition and religion. Because they after like the Europeans came, they you know what I mean? They merged together, so like they still kept some of their traditions. And I noticed like one time they did a cross, and they did something to it, but it didn't even look like a cross. So like I don't know, it was kind of weird. Like I was like, wait, isn't the cross the important stuff? You know, because it's like Catholic. You know, the cross, like what's it called? Like where Jesus was crucified. So I thought it was interesting. Like it was a cross at first, but all of a sudden, like I was like, where did the cross go? You know what I mean? Like from what I know, like in religion, the cross is the most important thing, you know, but it wasn't. It was like covered up. So I was like, I thought it was kind of strange. I don't know. I thought it was like weird, but I don't know. Like they do that for a reason. You know what I mean? Who knows? So that is it. That's all I want to share. Oh yeah. And lastly, I want to say, like, I give my family grows coffee. Well, my dad's family. Well, yeah, they're my family too. So they grow coffee, and I took coffee to my dad. I'm like, can you guys please give me coffee so I could, um, can you guys give me coffee because I want to give some to my dad. And then, so they give me coffee, and I take it to my dad, and I tell him, oh, I tell him, I want to show you how you make this coffee. And he was like, oh, I already know. I'm like, what do you mean you know? I tell him, this is what they drink every day. This is what you used to drink every day. Something that I told him something about, like, how they used to grow it. And then he was like, oh, I know, I remember. And I tell him, all of a sudden you remember, because he said he doesn't remember. And I tell my cousins, hey, please send me coffee because maybe that that coffee will help my dad remember his childhood. And they're laughing, and then I give it to my dad, and he said what he said. He was like, oh, I know how to make it. I'm like, how do you know? Like, now you remember? I told him like that, like, I'm pretty sure he remembers, but like he's embarrassed that maybe they didn't treat him well, and maybe he got trauma. When you have like a bad experience and trauma, you don't want to recall that. You don't want to remember any of that. So maybe it's just that trauma, and I shouldn't get too into it. But that is it, everyone. Hopefully this video was interesting. I don't want to. It was like, hopefully what I said was interesting. Like, it wasn't too controversial. You know what I mean? The idea I wanted to share that because I've been, about my ancestry. Because I think it's important, right? Like, to learn, even though this is like, you could brush this aside, it's still kind of important, you know what I mean? Like, because it did have a lot of effects, right? Like, he didn't get, because he was so ashamed of his family, he didn't get to say bye to his mom, and, I didn't get to meet my grandma, and, all this stuff happened, and it sucks, you know what I mean? Because he didn't want to he didn't want to be part of that. I wasn't able to be part of that, you know what I mean? And that sucks, so that's why I'm sharing this video, and you know what I mean? Hopefully people learn, it's like, if you're in a mixed relationship or whatever, like, or like you have family go through that, it's like, don't make that mistake, it's not fair to your children, it's important, and then I told my dad, I told him like, oh, because I told him you never said bye to your mom and she was looking for you. And then, because my brother had killed himself around that time. And that's when I met my cousin, for the first time. And then he's like, yeah, I think it's karma because, he said it's karma that my son didn't say bye to me. So I think in a way it's karma that I didn't say bye to my mom. My mom really wanted to see me, and I didn't care. And my son, in a way, he did the same, He never said bye to me, he never talked to me. He just, killed himself, didn't say bye, didn't say anything, locked himself in the room. He was like, it must be karma, I was like, that I didn't say bye to my mom, and I was like, maybe, I was like, it happens, So that's when I told him, and I don't know, like, he still hasn't changed. He's kind of changed a little. My father, like, just a little, but I don't know. I don't know what to do with my father, but he still has a long way to open up because he doesn't open up with us. But hopefully in the future, I guess. I don't know. Hopefully he opens up more. because I had a fun time meeting my dance family. I've learned so much. I had so much fun meeting them. I was so happy to learn a lot of stuff. And I'm so happy. And that's it. So thanks for watching, everyone, and sorry I talked a lot.